Mazzoli Show.
The news. Here is an illustrated summary of the news happenings at home and abroad.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Brock Lawley program. My name is Brock Lawley. I am your fearless host. It's the show we tackle the headlines of the day. Chaff from wheat, wheat from chaff. We sift it out. Serve it up to your ADD reality television show minds on a silver platter of rhetorical deliciousness. That is the show in a nutshell. Let's move on to the story, shall we? So Cruz exits stage right. What an amazing man he is. Look, all I can tell you about Ted Cruz is I don't think I've ever seen such a principled conservative in my lifetime. And that includes Reagan, that includes everybody. I have never seen somebody with that level of just conservative understanding, wherewithal, fortitude, fire in the belly, fearlessness. Cruz had a lot, if you want me to be frank with you, Cruz had a lot of aesthetic problems, a lot of visceral problems, you know. And I always lamented that just because, you know, it packs such a punch in this world. It just does. I don't know why. The messenger is so much less, or more important than the message. And that's just horrible, and I don't like that. Because message alone, there's just nobody even close to the guy. He's in his own stratosphere. Listen, conservative solutions will solve the nation's problems. It will solve the nation's fiscal problems. It will solve the nation's social problems. The problem is we're a wisdomless nation with no appetite for it because it sounds like work. Anyway, Ted Cruz deserves a round of applause. Left it all on the field. Just an amazing guy. Just really is. Ran an amazing campaign, too. If you think about the uphill battles, just an amazing campaign. He was the only one that really had, you know, the fortitude, the strategy, the smarts to hang with Donald Trump. Donald Trump was just a tornado that just tore through the system. I think any other year, Ted Cruz's strategy would have worked. It really would have worked. So there that is. It is what it is. I know there's a whole host of ideas out there, varying degrees of sadness and all this different stuff. It's not really how I choose to look at this moving forward. But Ted Cruz is just a mountain of a man. I mean, I don't think his days of laying waste to leftist lies, insanity, and destruction are done by any means. There was just a lot missing in the delivery for him, and I really think that's what it was. You know, I mean, the biggest problem, and I'm not the first to say this, I really think Ted Cruz is the biggest problem is he only had fifth gear. You know what I mean? He was painting a portrait, and it was a gorgeous portrait, and all he had was a huge painter's brush. And occasionally what he needed was a couple needle-nose nuanced brushes, right, to get in around the edges and sort of bring out the eyes and stuff like that. He just didn't seem to have it. I mean, every time he opened his mouth, it was like some grandiose speech, and I just don't think that plays well in an election where the biggest currency is authenticity, or even, if you don't believe in authenticity, at least the presentation of authenticity. So that's just my 2 cents on it. The New York Times is gleefully happy. They express righteous astonishment and this and that. We'll see who's got the last laugh here. New York Times, as you're going digital fast because your paper's a rag. All right. So there's a piece in the New York Times also, no Bushism, no conservatism, yes to Trumpism. That's the name of the piece. So the piece argues that the nation, and specifically the conservative or the Republican voter base, gave a big middle finger to Bush, and all those cronies gave a big middle finger to conservatism, and instead it's trying on a new pair of pants. And I don't know how far off this is, even though it's scribbled at the old lady of lies. I don't know how far off this is. I think there's some truth to that. Different flavor of gum. I don't think it's completely fair, but it's interesting to chew on that's where we sit. I think a better way to look at this is whatever the Republican Party called what they were selling for the last 10 years, it wasn't conservatism. And real conservatives like myself know that. You know, we know that. So to get behind whatever they got in the barrel is just not going to work. You know, you can call it conservatism if you want to, and the New York Times is quick to do so. But the New York Times writers wouldn't know a conservative crawled in his lap in a thong. They wouldn't know it. So, you know, what kind of credibility do they have on the subject matter? What I'm saying is the Republican Party was trying to sell fool's gold to a conservative that, you know, spent some time in the San Francisco gold mining community back at the turn of the century, and they just knew it was crap. And so they're like, look, we don't want it anymore. We're throwing you out. You're cowardless. You're gutless. You don't do anything. You don't say anything. You don't fight. You don't push back. Why would we vote for you? So that Trump isn't, quote unquote, your stereotypical conservative. The way the average conservative voter must be looking at this, and I'm assuming a lot of this, but they must be saying, well, we're not getting conservatism anyway. At least we'll get a little guts. At least we'll get a little fire in the belly. At least we'll get a little fight. I mean, I'm thinking that's what they're thinking, right? I mean, am I way out in La La Land with that? George Will, who has lost all credibility in my mind, when he says he's not only going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but he's going to try to defeat the Republican candidate, that's just absurd to me, specifically in 2016. But he asked the question, will Donald Trump do his homework now and become more like George Will? Well, the answer to George Will is no. Because your Inc., your establishment, Washington Pan Am Inc., is despised. So if I were his advisor, which I am not, I would say to him, here's our campaign strategy. Be as little as the establishment Republicans as possible. Be as polar opposite of George Will as possible. Because they're hacks who are just upset because they're losing their influence by the day. Anyway, there it is. Wall Street Journal wants to coach Donald Trump. You got to admit this, right? These Washington guys are still on TV making predictions. Oh, my gosh. God, all I can tell you is Hillary Clinton is just going to run roughshod over the Trumpster. This is the same clown who was like, Donald Trump has no chance whatsoever. And then 2 weeks later, he's like, oh my gosh, did you hear what he said about John McCain? He's like, got no chance. And then two weeks later, he's like, he's got a unicorn's chance. And 2 weeks later, it's, oh my gosh, 1 in a million, better chance of winning a lottery. These guys have no credibility, and they're still out there squawking. Still. Am I the only one that finds this preposterous? It's just amazing. And all these Alphabet Soup channel, what they should be doing if they had any sense, clean house. All these commentators, clean house. There's a lot of guys out there that read the tea leaves, right? Get some fresh blood, get some fresh perspective. You were wrong. You were wrong. Your wrongness paraded itself before a nation as Trump just ascended like a NASA launch. You're wrong. All these cats that are blowing hard on your television stations. Wrong. The only thing they have in common is how wrong they are. Varying degrees of wrong. Fail. Now you got these guys out there still clamoring and clapping. Unbelievable to me. Out of touch with reality. The Democratic race, ladies and gentlemen, was supposed to be over long ago. Somebody forgot to send Bernie a memo. Look, I had lunch at a wedding I was at recently. The whole table was full of Bernie Sanders supporters. These guys are all employed, doing all right for themselves. They must have forgotten the part where Bernie wants to take 90% of their income. I don't know what they're thinking, but all I can tell you is Bernie Sanders is the only one with any groundswell whatsoever on the Democratic side. The Democratic Party is so corrupt. It doesn't matter anyway. The thing was over before it started. But Bernie Sanders still racking up victories. Victories! Ladies and gentlemen, threw a haymaker again at the jawline of the glass candidate Hillary Clinton, who's, I don't think the world's ever seen more corruption in a mainstream candidate in anybody's lifetime. I don't think it's ever existed, ever. And today they just break, the hacker comes out and says he hacked into Hillary's server, which means if you got some Romanian, weird joke of a hacker, what do you think China's doing with major money and resources, ladies and gentlemen? What is China and the world's enemies doing? She was a Secretary of State. Imagine what was on that server. Just imagine, ladies and gentlemen. She was the Secretary of State. They were using her server, ladies and gentlemen, like a porta potty at a local town fair. In and out, dropping dumps left and right all over the United States security system. Amazing to me that this isn't seen as something serious. Anyway, yes. Breaking news, hacker hacked Hillary Clinton's server. It's not exactly like we don't know that this took place. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been telling you about this story. Jason Raleigh, a black intellectual, banned from speaking. I'm going to repeat that. Banned from speaking at a university, West Virginia. He's on TV telling his story. This is normality on the campus. This is just normal and acceptable. I mean, presidents are cool with it. Faculty's cool with it. It's just straight totalitarianism. It's just straight speech squelching. And naked. Unabashed. We don't like you. This is a black conservative. Why aren't these people racists, by the way? A black man wants to come on your campus and speak, and he's muzzled. He, you might be able to say figuratively, is ushered off the campus in chains and a muzzle around his mouth. I mean, this is the university system in this country. How is this not an indictment on liberalism? Liberalism is like a mouse butt hair away from totalitarianism at this point. Evidenced right here. How long will the American people put up with it? I don't know. How long will the alumni who write checks to these universities put up with it? I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. It's preposterous to me. In line with that story, and this is just the shape of things to come, so buckle up. Democrats now suing conservative groups for saying anything skeptical of, quote, man-made global warming, quote. Ladies and gentlemen, what is this other than brown shirt intellectualism? You will comply. You will, ladies and gentlemen, these guys are concerned of 0.4% CO2, which, by the way, is plant food. In and of itself, it's so preposterous. Zero science, all junk science. But they're relying on some sort of bully pulpit, or when somebody says something other than, oh my gosh, this person's saying something other than what we're saying. Oh my gosh, can you believe this person? Circle around this person, point at them and laugh at them. Is this science? No, but it's going to work. That's what basic leftism on this issue consists of. Get a whole bunch of people around this person, point at them and laugh at them because they say something that we don't say. That's it. The second you do any research on this, the whole thing comes apart. These people never debate. They never allow any dissent. Why, one might ask? If they're all rock solid on their footing, why would they not get in the arena of ideas? Because they can't, ladies and gentlemen. Because they can't. Actual science does not support this. This is all cronyism. This is all to make money. This is all to grow the government. Period. That's what this is about. Anyway, they're suing people, and this is a true story. Free Beacon is blowing this one up. They are suing people. 90 conservative groups are getting sued because they refuse to shut up about leftist, totalitarian, power grab lies. This, ladies and gentlemen, is America 8 years into the Democrat presidency. 8 years. 7.5 years, this is what washes up on the shores of a republic, of a democracy. Startling. I bring you these stories constantly. It's startling is what it is. It shouldn't be roll your eyes even though it comes down the pike every week. I bring these stories to you constantly. Jimmy Kimmel's out there on his high horse too about catastrophic global warming and trying to beat up on Sarah Palin or some such nonsense. Daily Caller has that. Ladies and gentlemen, as the left sandblasts the actual American history from the marble of our statues, they replace them with their own golden calf of LGBT worship. And I'm not kidding you. A national monument declared in honor of LGBT. You can't even write this stuff. And I assure you it won't be the last. Washington Post has that piece. Ladies and gentlemen, the amount of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism, Jew hate that emerges from the left is just baffling to me. I've been calling some of my Jewish friends and saying, you know, what are you doing even supporting the Democratic Party? Case in point, David Horowitz, which I love, is printed up posters with the names of Jew haters all across American campuses, specifically on California campuses. And he's putting these posters up. Now the professors are walking around blacking out their names. Only David has enough vision and guts to do this, by the way. This is what we should be doing. These are anti-Semites. We fought a war to push back on this. We fought a war to push back on the most bloodthirsty tyrant to ever live, who just hated Jews. You should read some of this stuff. It reads like Mein Kampf. I'm not kidding you. These people are anti-zealot or anti-Semite zealots. They hate Jews. They hate Jews. They hate Israel and they hate Jews. JewishJournal.com has that piece. And sadly enough, this is also a piece, if you can even believe this. The UK Labour Party, which is the Democrat Party of the UK, just suspended 50 of their members for gross and flagrant anti-Semitism. And this is the tip of the iceberg. If you dig down, you're going to see an entire world of this. This is the left. The left is anti-Semitic. The left hates Jews. Why do more people not know about this? The Democrat Party hates Jews. Hillary's coal comment, where she's talking gleefully about shutting down coal jobs, is biting her in the butt. You have some guy in West Virginia who just called her out and said, this is my family. This is how I make a living. How dare you do this stuff? It's amazing. And then she's trying to talk her way out of it. But, what can you do? Just videotape on this stuff. Anyway, another terror attack averted, ladies and gentlemen. Now, by the way, and this is the irony, is the Democrat Party calls this stuff all or calls it Islamophobia. When we avert a terror attack. This guy tried to blow up a Jewish worship center. Converting to Islam turns this loser into a mass murderer, basically, if you read this article. Sadly, ladies and gentlemen, that's how it spins. Wildly off its axis, the world, that is. Under leftist rule, fight back. Courage, 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 courage.
À Broclo, les productions